Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. The first sign should have been the missing fork. Yeah, I know sounds stupid, but I swear in that small, silent moment at dinner, something cracked. She made pasta. 3 forks in the drawer like always, but only 2 on the table. Hers and mine, not his. That's when I knew he wasn't just a rumor anymore. He'd been there probably the night before. Maybe longer. I didn't ask. What's the point? She would have lied like she always did. Smiling too wide, brushing my cheek, saying I work too much and imagine too many things. But I wasn't imagining the cologne that wasn't mine, the damp towel that wasn't mine, the wine glass in the dishwasher with lipstick she never wore. I played along, nodding, chewing, acting like I didn't feel like throwing up with every bite. That's what a man does when he's clinging to the last thread of denial. I should have left then. Should have walked out with whatever dignity I had left. But I didn't, because Brina wasn't just my wife. She was my only person. Or at least, she used to be. The moment came 2 nights later. She thought I was asleep. I wasn't. I hadn't been, not really, in weeks. She was on the phone in the kitchen, soft voice, but I could hear every word. No, I'm not with him. I just haven't left yet. Then a pause, a giggle. Why rush? He still pays for everything. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then the rail kicker came. Another voice, loudspeaker, her friend Harper. That voice had always rubbed me wrong. Hurry up, girl. I'll take him if you won't. And just like that, it wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. I walked into the kitchen slowly, quietly. She turned mid-sentence, eyes wide like a raccoon caught in the trash. I looked at Harper's smiling face on the screen, then at Brina, and I said, "Let's go." No yelling, no questions, just 2 words. And Harper, she blinked, then burst out laughing. "You serious?" I nodded. Brina opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "And Harper," she said, "I'll be there in 10. That was the beginning of the end, or maybe the beginning of something much worse. By the time Harper pulled up outside, I was already standing in the driveway with my overnight bag. No plan, no destination, just a duffel with 2 shirts, a charger, and whatever pride I could gather in 10 minutes. Brina hadn't moved from the kitchen. She stood there, mouth open, hands gripping the edge of the sink like it could anchor her to whatever illusion she'd built. When Harper stepped out of the car, her heels clicked like gunshots across the pavement. That woman didn't hesitate for a second. She gave me a look like she'd just won a bet. No hug, no words, just a nod, and an unlocked passenger door. I slid in like it was the most natural thing in the world. Even though my heart was pounding loud enough to drown out my thoughts, Brina came out after us barefoot, her voice shaking, but her face composed like she was still performing for an invisible audience. "You're not really going with her," she said, almost laughing, like I was the punchline of a joke she hadn't finished telling. "Dorian, don't be dramatic. You're just mad because I said something stupid." Harper leaned across me and said through the window, "No, sweetie, he's mad because you meant it." And then she drove. No music, no talking, just the hum of the engine and the occasional sigh from me. Because I still couldn't believe I had actually left, that I was now the passenger in my wife's best friend's car. After hearing her volunteer to take me like I was an abandoned shopping cart. "Where are we going?" I finally asked after a few blocks. Harper didn't look at me. "Somewhere you're not tolerated like a burden." Sounded nice. Too nice. Unreal. We ended up at her apartment. Clean, neat, stylish. Everything Brina used to pretend to care about before she decided I was beneath her. Harper poured us drinks. I didn't want one, but I took it anyway. I needed something to numb the spinning. She talked like she'd been waiting for this moment. She called Brenna a manipulator, said she'd watched me shrink over the years, become a shell of the guy she once teased for being too sweet. And the worst part, I believed her. It was like opening the blinds and realizing your house was full of mold. I slept on her couch that night, and for the first time in months, I didn't wake up drenched in anxiety. But peace wasn't exactly what came next, because the next morning, my phone blew up. Missed calls, voicemails, messages from Brenna that started with, "We need to talk," and ended with, "How could you humiliate me like this?" Harper, brushing her teeth in the hallway, said, "Did she finally realize you're not her backup plan?" I looked at the screen. 58 unread messages. I didn't reply because deep down I was starting to realize maybe I was the one who should have left long ago. The silence between messages said more than the words she typed. There were long gaps where I knew she was staring at her screen, trying to find something, anything that would bring me back. First it was, "Let's talk." Then it didn't mean anything. Then came the guilt grenades. "So, you're just going to run off with her?" And finally, the cold strike. "Wow. I always knew Harper had a thing for you. Guess you were both pathetic enough to prove me right." I didn't answer, not because I didn't want to, but because for once, I knew there was nothing left to explain. I had spent years defending myself against her moods, her silence, her subtle digs that chipped away at me until I couldn't tell if I was still a person or just someone she tolerated, because it was easier than starting over. Every time I wanted to leave, I reminded myself of our wedding vows, of the promise to weather storms, but she had already boarded another ship. I'd just been too blind to notice. Harper made coffee and didn't ask questions. She sat across from me in pajama pants, scrolling through her phone like nothing unusual had happened. She didn't cuddle me or offer comfort. That made it easier somehow. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted honesty. And she gave it to me like a dose of bitter medicine. "She's not mad you left," Harper finally said. "She's mad you didn't wait for her permission." That hit hard because she was right. Brenna had dangled the threat of leaving for months, always with a smug kind of control. Like she was testing how far she could push before I'd push back. But I never did. I waited. I obeyed. I apologized for things I didn't even do just to keep the peace. And now that I'd finally stepped out of her little theater, she didn't know how to handle the empty stage. I told Harper I needed to grab a few more things from the house, and to my surprise, she didn't protest. She just handed me her spare keys and said, "If you get sucked back in, don't bring her here. I'll change the locks." The drive back felt like walking into a trap I'd already escaped from. My stomach was tight, my hands clammy. When I opened the front door, the house felt unfamiliar, like someone had rearranged my life while I was gone. Brenna was sitting on the couch, not crying, not screaming, just calm. "Too calm. I knew you'd come back," she said, as if nothing had happened. "You just needed time." I didn't reply. I walked past her to the bedroom, grabbed my things quietly. She followed me, standing in the doorway like some haunting shadow. "You're really doing this?" she asked, her voice cracking for the first time. "You're seriously leaving because of a joke? You know Harper doesn't care about you, right? She's using you to get back at me." That one made me pause, not because I believed it, but because it reminded me how easily she twisted things, how fast she could reframe betrayal as comedy. Her cheating, a joke, her words misunderstood, my pain, an overreaction. I zipped my bag and turned to face her. "You said you weren't with me. You just hadn't left yet, so I made it easy for you." Her expression collapsed. For a second, I thought she might actually cry. But she didn't. Instead, she said something that chilled me more than any slap or scream ever could. "You'll come crawling back. You always do." I walked out without another word. But as I closed the door behind me, I couldn't help but wonder. What if she was right? The first 3 days felt like I was living in a parallel timeline. I wasn't exactly free, but I wasn't trapped anymore either. I stayed with Harper, who barely spoke unless I did. She gave me space, didn't treat me like a project or a broken man who needed fixing. That silence was what I didn't know I craved. No sarcasm, no constant corrections, no passive-aggressive comments over how I stirred my coffee or folded the laundry. Just silence and my own thoughts. Finally audible for the first time in years. But peace doesn't last when your past is glued to your phone. Brina wasn't done. Her calls got more unpredictable. At 2 a.m., she left a voicemail sobbing, telling me she missed me. At 8 a.m., she sent a message saying she'd already changed the locks, and I wasn't welcome back. At noon, she texted a photo of our wedding day and captioned it, "Was this all fake to you?" I didn't reply. I knew any response would suck me back into her performance, because that's what it was now, a show where she played the abandoned wife, and I was supposed to come crawling back to my role. But something broke the cycle. On the 4th day, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a video, short, 10 seconds. It showed her in a bar, not old footage. It was from the night after I left. She was laughing on a guy's lap. Some stranger's hand was tracing her collarbone. Her friend Kelsey was the one filming, whispering behind the camera. Guess she didn't need time to heal. I couldn't breathe when I saw it. Not because I was shocked, but because I had almost convinced myself I was overreacting, that maybe I had left too soon, that maybe I had misinterpreted everything. But there it was, proof that I'd been a placeholder, a seat warmer until something more exciting came along. I showed Harper the video, half expecting her to gloat. Instead, she frowned. She wanted you to see that, either to hurt you or to make you jealous. Probably both. And she was right again. Brina always needed the upper hand. Even in a breakup, she had to win. Later that night, I drove to a storage facility and rented a small unit. I went back to the house one last time with a police escort just in case. She wasn't there, but she'd left a note taped to the fridge. Guess the joke wasn't so funny now, huh? Like her betrayal had been some kind of twisted prank I failed to laugh at. I packed the rest of my things, books, old journals, clothes she hadn't tossed or hidden. And then, in one of the drawers under the bed, I found something she clearly didn't mean to leave behind. A notebook, one I'd never seen. Inside were scribbled notes and pros and cons lists. Literal lists about me. Pros, pays bills, not controlling, safe, predictable. Cons, boring, emotionally weak, not ambitious. Doesn't make me feel excited anymore. I read it 3 times before the words really hit. That's how she saw me. That's what I'd been boiled down to. A checklist of tolerable traits and disappointments. A man measured by how interesting he was to her, not by who he really was. And for the first time since this whole thing began, I didn't feel sad. I felt insulted, like I'd spent years auditioning for a role I never even wanted, just so she wouldn't leave. But she already had. I didn't go back to Harper's that night. I drove for hours. No destination, no plan, just me and the road, and the echo of that damn list in my head. Boring, emotionally weak, predictable. It spun on repeat like some cruel chant. I kept thinking, how long had she felt that way? Was she already seeing him when we went to that awful couples retreat last fall? Did she look at me across the table during dinner and just feel nothing? I ended up parked in front of an old gas station 2 towns over. I sat there for a long time, watching the clerk sweep the floor and flipped the open sign to closed. That's when I realized I had no idea who I was without her. My life had become so tied to proving I was enough for Brenna that I never built anything of my own. I didn't even know what I liked anymore. I hadn't made a real decision without asking her first in years. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from Harper. "Are you okay?" Simple. And for some reason, it hit harder than all of Brenna's desperate guilt-tripping. I didn't answer. I didn't want to be someone else's project, even hers. I just needed to feel like a man again. Not even a strong man, just a whole one. The next morning, I finally returned to Harper's. She didn't ask questions. She handed me coffee, slid over a breakfast sandwich, and sat in silence. I was halfway through eating when she finally said, "You know what your real problem is? You never asked yourself what you want. You've always been reacting to Brenna. Even now, you're still playing by her rules." It stung because it was true. Every part of my life had been shaped around not upsetting Brenna. My hobbies, ones she found acceptable. My job, one that gave her weekends free. My friends slowly discarded if she didn't approve. Even my clothes were things she picked out. And now that she was gone, or rather that I was gone, I didn't even know what parts of me were actually mine. Later that day, Harper invited me to join her at her friend's small backyard gathering. Nothing fancy, just a few people, some drinks, and light music. I hesitated, but she insisted. "You need to be around people who don't treat you like a task." She said, "Just exist for a while." It was awkward at first. I felt like an outsider looking in, like everyone else had lives, and I was just some wreckage that washed up in Harper's passenger seat. But after a while, I found myself laughing at some dumb story someone told about mistaking laundry detergent for coffee creamer. It was dumb, and it was real. Nobody there knew me as Brenna's husband. I was just Dorian. And for the first time in forever, that was enough. But just as I started to breathe again, reality clawed its way back. Harper got a text. She turned pale, handed me her phone without a word. It was a group message. Brenna had posted a long, passive-aggressive update in some shared friend group chat. It was full of half-truths and veiled jabs. How I had left her for her best friend. How I couldn't handle a strong woman. And how some men only feel powerful when they're being war-ripped. The worst part, people were responding with hearts with, "You deserve better with." I always thought he was a little spineless. That crushed me more than I expected. Not just the lies, but the way people accepted them so easily. Like all those years, I smiled through dinner parties, fixed their laptops, helped them move, meant nothing. I looked at Harper and whispered, "Am I really that pathetic?" She didn't laugh, didn't soften it. She just said, "Only if you go back." And I knew she was right. That night, I stared at the ceiling in Harper's guest room, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those group chat messages again. Mocking, dismissive, rewritten like I'd been some sort of controlling tyrant instead of the man who tiptoed around his own home to keep the peace. It felt like my entire identity was being disassembled in real time, reshaped into a villain I didn't even recognize. And the worst part, no one questioned it. Not one friend, not one voice saying, "That doesn't sound like Dorian." I wondered how long she'd been preparing that version of the story, how many private complaints she'd whispered to our mutual friends over brunch or girls' nights. She must have been laying the groundwork for months, maybe years. And I had no idea because I trusted her to protect my name like I had protected hers, silently, always. By morning, something shifted in me. I was tired of letting her script the narrative. Tired of being the quiet casualty in a story I never agreed to, I opened my laptop, created a new social media account with no mutual friends, no baggage, and for the first time in my life, I wrote. Not a rant, not a revenge post, just the truth. My truth. What I heard that night in the kitchen, what she said, what her friend said, what I did after. No names, no drama, just facts laid bare like broken glass on tile. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few strangers would read it. Maybe no one would. But it was mine, unfiltered, unedited. For once, it wasn't about being polite. It was about being honest. The post went viral within hours. I watched as thousands of people shared, commented, and messaged. Some called it sad, others called it empowering. But what caught me most off guard were the dozens, no, hundreds of messages from men saying, "This is me. I lived this. I never told anyone." And just like that, I realized I wasn't alone. But I also realized something darker. A message came in from a burner account. No name, no profile picture, just 5 words. "You think you're safe now?" I froze. I hadn't mentioned Brina's name. I hadn't shared photos, nothing traceable. But someone close to her had seen it, and they knew exactly who it was about. And if they knew, so did she. Harper walked in with coffee and instantly read my face. I showed her the message. She didn't say anything at first. Then she asked, "Do you think she'd actually do something? I mean, more than just smear your name?" I didn't know. That was the scary part. I had lived so long in the shadow of her disapproval that I never imagined her as truly dangerous, manipulative, yes, cruel with words, absolutely, but threatening. I couldn't tell anymore, because this wasn't the same woman I married. Or maybe it was, and I was just finally seeing her without the filters. Later that afternoon, Harper left for work, and I stayed behind, scrolling through replies to my post. Somewhere in the noise, I found one that stopped me cold. It was from an account named Rachel. Doesn't he forget? All it said was, "If you think Harper's your savior, ask her what happened in Cabo 3 years ago." Cabo, that trip Brina had taken with her friends, the one she insisted I skip because it was just the girls. Harper had gone. Rachel had gone. I hadn't thought about it in years, but now it crawled back like something sour. You tried to swallow and couldn't. I clicked the profile. Empty. No posts, no followers, just that one comment. I sat there, phone in my hand, heart in my throat, suddenly unsure again. Because now, it wasn't just about Brina. It was about whether the person who helped me escape had been part of the trap all along. I must have stared at that message for half an hour before I moved. Ask her what happened in Cabo 3 years ago. 7 words that kicked the floor out from under me. Couldn't shake it. The timing, the delivery, the fact that whoever sent it didn't even try to sugarcoat the implication. It wasn't just a vague warning. It was surgical, deliberate, like someone had waited for this exact moment to strike. The funny thing is, I remembered that trip not because anything dramatic happened then, at least not to me, but because of how weird things were after. Brina had come back with a slight sunburn and a suddenly icy distance in bed. Harper, meanwhile, sent me a souvenir T-shirt with the words "single" for the weekend printed in hot pink. I'd laughed at the time, thought it was some cheeky bachelorette joke. Now, it felt like a confession I never caught. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but, let's be honest, my gut had been warning me for years, and I'd ignored it. I started wondering if Harper wasn't a rescuer, but a replacement. Maybe she'd inserted herself into my life, not out of kindness, but out of guilt, or worse, strategy. When she came home that evening, I was sitting in her living room with the lights off. the TV on mute, and my phone still gripped in my hand. She didn't even get her shoes off before she noticed my face. "What happened?" she asked cautiously, like she already knew something was off. I didn't shout, didn't accuse. I just held up the phone and read the message out loud. Then I added quietly, "Is there something I should know?" She didn't answer immediately. She leaned against the wall and folded her arms, chewing on the inside of her cheek like she was biting back something bitter. When she finally spoke, her voice was tired. Too tired for someone with nothing to hide. "Cabo wasn't what Brena told you it was," she said. "It wasn't just a girls' trip." I waited. "There were guys," she continued, "some locals, some tourists. It wasn't organized or anything. Just messy, drunken nights. Brena cheated on you. I didn't tell you because I thought it would crush you back then. You were already shrinking. And did you cheat with anyone?" I interrupted. My voice came out calm, but the tightness in my chest was unbearable. Harper looked me dead in the eyes and didn't blink. "Yes," she said. I felt the wind get knocked out of me. I stood up too fast, knocked over the glass of water I'd been nursing all day. It shattered on the hardwood, sharp and sudden, like the truth she just dropped at my feet. "Was it with her?" I asked. "Did you both sleep with the same guy? Laugh about it. Come back and keep smiling in my face." "No," she said quickly. "It wasn't like that. Brena slept with some bartender. I hooked up with someone else. It meant nothing. It meant nothing. That's what people always say when it's not their heart on the floor." I gathered my things without saying another word. She tried to stop me. Said I was blowing it out of proportion. That she was trying to protect me. That she never meant to be part of my pain. But that was the thing. She already was to hit me all at once. I hadn't just been betrayed by my wife. I'd been surrounded by people who thought my feelings were disposable, who thought they could decide what I needed to know and what I didn't, who played both sides and called it help. That night, I checked into a motel off the highway. Cheap, quiet, ugly wallpaper and buzzing lights. But at least it was honest. And for the first time since I left Brena, I realized I was completely, terrifyingly alone. The motel was silent except for the hum of the vending machine in the hallway. I lay on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision that had led me there. I had nothing left but a single bag of clothes, a dead phone battery, and a mind racing with every betrayal I had swallowed over the past few years. I felt hollow, like I'd been scraped clean inside. But oddly enough, that emptiness didn't feel like defeat. It felt like space. Space to rebuild. The next morning, I checked out and drove aimlessly until I found a small lakeside park I hadn't been to since college. I sat there for hours just watching the water. No texts, no voices, no manipulation, just me and the breeze. I realized I didn't need to run anymore. I didn't need to hide or beg anyone to see my worth. Later that week, I found a short-term rental in a quiet part of town. I started working remote, took a leave of absence from the chaos. I got a journal, not to vent, just to remember what I liked. What I used to love before my entire life revolved around keeping someone else happy. I started writing again, reading again, cooking for myself, even if it was terrible at first. But every meal I made was mine. And then something unexpected happened. One of the guys who'd messaged me after my viral post reached out again. His name was Eli. We got coffee. Turned out he'd gone through something eerily similar. Wife, betrayal, mutual friends who vanished the moment she rewrote the story. He wasn't looking for sympathy, just solidarity. And I needed that more than I realized. I started attending a local men's support group. Not therapy, just men like me. Men who had been called too soft, too emotional, or not enough. Men who were tired of pretending they were okay. And the strange thing, the more I listened, the more I healed. The more I spoke, the less I felt ashamed of how much I had endured. And Harper, I never spoke to her again. Not out of hatred, just peace. Sometimes to move forward, you have to leave everyone behind who kept you small, even if they once held your hand. Months passed. My name faded from the gossip threads. Brina moved on to her next exciting partner. And me, I finally started living. I've learned something. Healing doesn't always come with dramatic closure or perfect revenge. Sometimes it's quiet. It's waking up without dread. This grocery shopping alone and not feeling lonely. It's learning to like your own company again. And that's where I am now. Building something real. Something mine. Thanks for listening to my story. Now, I want to hear from you. What part of this journey hit you the hardest? Have you ever felt surrounded by people who smiled while slowly cutting you down? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it right here on Reddit Confessions.